from very beginning that I came down there, and I was just like 19 years old, right, fresh out of high school.
Yeah.
But I came there and I said, you know what, my goal is to become an Aikido instructor, and I'm going to stick around as long as it takes. And that's essentially what happened.
Hey guys, I've been putting out more Aikido related content on the channel lately. Check out those recent videos, interview with Prince Garrus, and also breaking down the Steven Skull Jesse and Kim training. But anyway, I thought it would be perfect timing to finally put out part of this interview I did with Rokas from the Martial Arts Journey, because he usually comes up in discussion when it comes to Aikido. So we're going to find out how he started his whole martial arts journey, how he got involved in Aikido, and some other stuff in this video. And the martial art journey continues. For example, he had just had an MMA fight that he unfortunately lost, but the silver lining is you tend to learn a lot more from your losses than your wins. So he covers that fight on a channel he just posted earlier today. Check that out. It's a really good video. Anyway, if you like this kind of content, please help support the channel by hitting the like button, subscribing, and sharing the video. You live in Lithuania, right?
Yeah.
Were there not great Aikido schools? Because you went to Switzerland and trained there for 3 years before coming back. Like, were there not
Yeah.
great schools in Lithuania?
Yes and no. And I guess, in a way, it's just my opinion, but I can also argument it. I'd say more than the no is more true than yes. Uh, the thing is, Lithuania, and I won't expand too much, but basically it's a historical thing as well. Lithuania used to be a Soviet country, like it was occupied, and martial arts were forbidden.
Mm.
So the Soviet Union collapsed, and Lithuania became independent basically between 89 to 91, and that's when I was born. And
Okay.
only basically when I was born, martial arts became legal to train and to teach in Lithuania. But that was a Soviet country. We were closed down behind the Iron Curtain. So no big time martial arts instructors could come and teach here, especially like nobody, because in most other countries, Japan sent their guys, Brazilians went to occupy the States with Gracie stuff. Like usually like some guys would come and teach something. In Lithuania, we had nothing. We didn't have any lineage. So most of the guys, they just had to kind of trained on their own from books, and they would go to seminars to like Russia mainly. They would learn stuff, they would come back. So it was a lot kind of not entirely self-taught, but a lot of kind of that level of training. And so we had like fourth, maybe third degree black belts, maybe fourth degree black belts, but nothing beyond that, and no one who had experience training like for years in Japan or so. And so because I had this ambition to become a full-time Aikido instructor, I wanted to learn from the best.
Sure.
And there was also no live-in program in Lithuania either. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go to someone who really knows Aikido really well. They trained in Japan. They know the ins and outs of it. They have like a high degree black belt. And that's essentially why I left. I didn't train here.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean, I
cool, man.
started training here, but I left eventually.
Yeah, you did mention you started there because I guess there's like an altercation on the street. And that kind of led you to wanting to learn self-defense. And one of your friends basically said, "Hey, how about Aikido?" And then I think you trained the first year in Lithuania, right? Or maybe a little longer, actually.
You mean my friend?
Yeah, because he basically said you should. This is based on me watching your videos.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, he said, "Oh, how about Aikido? Let's train in that." That's
Yeah.
why you went to Aikido, right? For actual self-defense reasons?
Yeah, essentially, yeah. Like it was a bit of a mix. Self-defense was definitely a very high priority for me because I lived in a violent city. But also I loved the whole Asian culture. I already watched like, well, Dragon Ball Z is not, that Asian, but it's still anime. But I loved the samurai and I loved all that stuff, ninjas, whatever. And I was training already on my own, so to speak, at home, like punching the punching bag, stuff like that,
Yeah,
just
yeah, doing
random
something,
stuff.
sure.
Nothing, nothing really helpful, but I thought I'm doing something. But then that friend, which that's very true what you said, he already practiced for 1 year. Then he made a break like for a year, and then he kind of hesitated coming back by himself, and he was like, yeah, you know what, you love this Japanese samurai stuff, you want to try Aikido? And initially, I wasn't sure if I like it, but then from the very first class, I just really was like, oh, I saw the swords, and I learned that they have the hakamas, this the samurai pants, and it's a Japanese martial art, and it's just like everything clicked for me, and I loved it from the get go. But yeah, initially, the main reason for self defense, but also kind of love for Asian culture.
Okay. I mean, because it seems like the average Aikido guy, and what would get me interested, Steven Seagal. So were you aware of him and his movies before you did those Aikido first classes?
I was. I wasn't because I know a number of guys who started Aikido because of Steven Seagal,
Sure.
but most of them were people who watched Above the Law right as soon as it came out.
Yeah, and
Like a
that
lot
kind of
of
came
the
out when you were born, so a
yeah,
little
exactly. So
different.
so
Yeah.
I grew up watching it, but I was a kid, so I was like, I didn't really understand what's happening, and I knew the movie. I knew Steven Seagal. He kicked ass, but then funny enough, I didn't know what Aikido is whatsoever. And I told my dad, hey, I'm going to go try Aikido. And he was like, oh, that's actually the thing that Steven Seagal does in the movie. And I was like, oh, really? And that's where it clicked for me. But it wasn't like the other way around for me.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. And it does kind of make sense when you were born, because honestly, like when you were more in your formative years, he wasn't exactly coming out with the best, most inspiring movies at that time in like 2005 or something, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
But here's a question. So when you went to Switzerland and trained, I believe for 3 years, how many hours a day were you training? And was it 7 days a week?
Yeah, it was more 6 days than seven officially. So 6 days there were regular classes. We were expected to participate in pretty much all of them. We sometimes could skip the kids' classes, but a lot of times we're also expected to help out with them. So we had free morning weapon classes per week, like at 6:30 a.m.
Okay.
And then there was like a meditation. Then we had evening classes. There was an Aikido class in the evening, Monday to Friday. Then a yoga, which I would participate as well, like every second day, and then
Sure.
a Saturday morning class. But then a lot of times we had weekend seminars, like workshops, or like full seminars, full weekend seminars. A lot of times we trained on our own, did extra classes. So we ended up training more than there was on the schedule, but it was a bunch. Like if it's like it's probably really bad with numbers, but I'd say 15 to 20 hours per week, just like pure Aikido, and then
Okay.
also extra other stuff.
So, I mean, it was almost kind of like a full or at least a part-time job then when you were there, it seems like, with the amount of hours.
Yeah. Oh no, I didn't have any extra time. Like I barely had extra time, and most of that actually went to cleaning the dojo, cooking food for each other, going to like special meetings. It was like a full-time job, although I
Yeah.
wasn't paid for it. So money I had to come by like in various ways. I would do small favors for dojo members, like do some construction work, although I wasn't very good at it, but I walked the dog for a friend. And eventually, because I was struggling with finances, my Aikido instructor, he was, which I'm really grateful for. I took on the job of cleaning his house. So that was one source of income. Then whenever I got a black belt, I started teaching privates. Then
Okay.
I started getting some extra responsibilities. So my fees went down. So like, that's kind of how I survived that whole thing. And my parents also supported me. I wasn't just sitting on the shoulder, like just sitting on the heads of my parents. They weren't like the only financial support, but they were also supportive. So it was like a whole mix. I just had to kind of make it through that way.
When you say the fees went down, like, do you mean like you had to pay to be part of the program?
Yeah, yeah. I think Switzerland is an expensive country, so I think again, kudos to the instructor there that the fee wasn't really high. I think,
Okay.
like compared to like if I would rent an apartment there, that would probably be more expensive than the whole program, which included training and lodging. But yeah, there was a fee, like a monthly fee, and sometimes you would have to pay for seminars as well, and obviously there's food and everything. But
Sure.
you'd pay a monthly fee for training and lodging. But then also we did cleaning of the dojo and taking care of other stuff. So I think that
Yeah, earning your keep that way,
yeah,
sure.
right.
So this program is basically designed for somebody to go there, to live and breathe it in order to become an Aikido instructor and then maybe go back to their own country? Is that kind of like what this program was designed for?
Not really. Like it really fit that narrative for me because that was
Okay.
my clear goal from the very beginning. I came down there and I was just like 19 years old, right, fresh out of high school.
Yeah.
But I came there and I said, you know what, my goal is to become an Aikido instructor, and I'm going to stick around as long as as long as it takes. And that's essentially what happened. But a lot of the people, other people, just come there for like a year. 3 years was one of the kind of record holders. There's
Okay.
people who spent more than I did, but I'm in the top five or something.
Yeah.
But essentially, most people would come for a year, and that was like kind of like almost like a spiritual journey for them.
Mhm.
They would get their black belt, and a lot of the times they would spend a couple more months, and then they would move on to do something else in their lives. Like it was a rare case that somebody would come specifically to become an instructor, but those stories do exist as well.
So in that program though, so somebody could go there and get a black belt in 1 year in Aikido?
Ish. Now I know it sounds really bad when we put
I
it that
mean,
way.
yes and no. Like if you're
Yeah,
doing it 6 days a week, like, for 6 hours a day or whatever.
yeah,
I mean, I guess he said pure Aikido is like 15 hours a week, but you doing
yeah,
other things too. But let's say if you're basically doing it almost like a job, I mean, I could see somebody getting black belt
yeah,
like in a year like
yeah.
that, not going to like class 3 days a week for an hour. Then it's just
Right.
like in a year,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
not. But
yeah. I'm not necessarily I'm not necessarily defending it, and I'm not attacking that concept at the same time. I think it's kind of that cautious middle, because to get an Aikido black belt is not that difficult actually. It's like some
really,
people get it in 3 to 4 years.
okay,
Depends on the school, but it's
yeah,
very
sure.
common to get a black belt in 3 to 4 years, training like 4 or 5 times per week. So that's not a lot compared to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, where you need at least
Yeah,
8
ten
years.
plus years. But
Right.
that 3 to 4 year timeline, that's taekwondo, that's karate. There's nothing,
Yeah.
like it shouldn't take you 10 years to get one at least, outside of like jujitsu, it seems like a
Yeah.
legit one does take at least like 10 years or something.
Right. Right. Right.
But I guess Aikido kind of fits the timeline of like other martial arts. It's like, yeah, 3, 4 years, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And also too, just to make sure I give all the information about that. When I look back, if somebody wanted to get a black belt in a year, usually they had to have had experience from before.
Okay.
Like they trained for like a year or 2 years in Aikido, and then they would kind of go that rest of the path. For somebody from zero, I think that wasn't really the case. But if they would really push for it, a year and a half, 2 years, they could still get it. So it was kind of like a year plus, but it depends.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know much about the Aikido ranking system, but do they go like white belt, yellow belt, green belt, like,
Right.
red belt, or like how does that work?
It depends on the school. Aikido, there's a lot of different schools, a lot of different organizations. It's a bit of a mess, and there's a lot of
Oh,
political stuff too. I guess in many martial arts there is. We're human, but essentially, the majority is just white belt to black belt, and I think that's kind of how the founder. I think the founder wasn't even concerned about black belt so much himself, but he would just come, from the stories I read and remember, he would come and say, "Oh, you're a black belt now," and just like that was it. So I
I mean,
think,
that makes
yeah,
sense. So it's basically like everybody, you're either not a black belt or you are.
right.
Yeah,
There are
that's
ranks.
interesting.
There are ranks, like you get ranks, like it's either from 10th Q to first Q, and then you get a black belt, or it's from 6th Q. It depends again on the school. But usually it's like white belt, white belt, white belt, white belt, and then you get a black belt, or sometimes brown belt.
Okay.
But some organizations do have colored belts, but I never had color belts until I got
Interesting.
into BJJ.
Yeah. You know what how I always think of martial arts and ranking, I always think, obviously the common perception is like white belt is beginner, which it is obviously. I always feel like black belt is the real beginner though, right?
Hmm.
Because at that stage you could start making it your own and refining
Right.
things, but at least you know how to do everything for the most part,
Right.
and it's
Yeah.
just about constantly sharpening it, maybe taking some stuff away, but basically refining. So I always see black belt as like the real beginning. That's my
Right.
opinion on martial arts,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, I'm with you, and I think that really applies well with Aikido because, as I said, I don't think it takes that much effort to become. I mean, it takes effort, but it's not that hardcore to get a black belt. And then you have first degree, second degree, third degree, and you get those quite quick as well. Like you can go from first degree to second degree in like 2 years, second degree to third degree in 3 years, which is not too bad. So it can really rise through the ranks. But then, so it kind of makes sense that that's the beginning point. For me personally, when I think about BJJ, as in comparison, for me, a black belt feels like, oh my god, this is a superpower. But to be fair as well, Matt Thornton, friend of mine, high ranking BJJ expert, he likes to say that that applies to BJJ as well. For him, and he's like, I don't know, fifth degree maybe, fourth, fifth, I'm not sure, but he's high. But he
Sure.
says getting a black belt in BJJ for him, that's also, he considers that's the real beginning, because
Oh, that's
he does the
interesting.
exact same thing that you said. Now you
Yeah.
know the main techniques, the main concepts, and now you can start to refine your own style. And so I think, yeah, it can apply to
Yeah,
other
that's
martial arts.
cool, man. I would almost I'm on board with that guy, but like if I had to give an exception, I'd probably say BJJ just because it took you 10 years to get
I
that. I'm
know,
like,
yeah,
okay, you're probably not the concept is kind of the same, but maybe that's kind of an exception in a way,
yeah, I'm with you as
compared to the
well.
martial arts. But what degree Aikido were you when you left Switzerland? Were you just first, or did you get your second, third before you went back to Lithuania?
I pushed for second, and I trained like really hard to make sure that I get the second before I opened my school. The deal was, if I wanted to open what we considered a club, which is like I teach 3 times per week in a rented space, and then I work a side job, then a first degree black belt is enough. When I said that I want a full-time school, usually you need a third degree, like based on that organization. But
Okay.
because I was like a living student and I was training so much, we decided, okay, well, I'm going to get a second one, and then I can open a full-time school. So I did pass my second degree black belt exam, and I came back as a second degree black belt. It took a while for me to send the papers to Japan, et cetera, et cetera. That's the political stuff, and eventually but that's kind of a different story now. But eventually, I passed like the initial exam test for a third degree, but I never got that uh, put on paper because by that time I already was gone from Aikido.
Oh, so you're basically a third degree, but not like on paper, I guess, right?
Right, like that's I kind of finished my Aikido career, so to speak, soon after I passed the initial stage of my third degree black belt, and I was already like ripe for that because I lagged with giving the paperwork for my second degree, and there's an official waiting period. You have to wait at least 3 years before you go from second degree to third degree. So it took a while for me to
Oh,
wait
interesting.
it out. But then eventually I was supposed to get my third degree, which was pretty cool for the age I was at, compared to my friends and colleagues. But as I said, never sent out the paperwork. But that's good because I saved money because you pay like $300 for it. So
Yeah, I mean, it is a business. There's always that fee
right.
with the belts, right?